everybody. Very pleased to have Representative Bill Foster here from Illinois' 11th District. He is the ranking member of the Subcommittee on the Financial Institutions and Monetary Policy, as well as the co-chair of the Blockchain Caucus. Also an extensive history as a scientist, PhD physicist from Fermilab. We are pleased to have him here. He'll speak a few words, and Nelson will come back up the stage, and they'll have a good conversation. So everyone, please give a warm welcome to Representative Foster.
Hello, and thank you for that nice introduction. I sometimes introduce myself as saying I represent 100% of the strategic reserve of physicists in the U.S. Congress. Actually, if you fly into O'Hare from the west, if you look down, you'll see these two giant rings, which during all the time I was there were the most powerful particle accelerators in the world. We were smashing protons and antiprotons together to make particles that haven't been around since the Big Bang. And so actually in one of those two rings, there's a machine that I invented and led the teams that built it. So I had a 25-year career in high energy particle physics, during which time I think at this point I'm the only member of Congress that's actually programmed neural networks, which is something that I did back in the 1990s first. We were trying to identify the particle physics interactions. I'm also, I think, Congress's only chip designer. I'm very proud of the fact that every one of the 10 chips that I've designed worked the first time. So I kind of get this stuff. I believe I'm also only the only actual blockchain program in the U.S. Congress. My son and I, every Christmas we celebrate my teaching him to write computer code with a software project. And a few Christmases ago, we said, let's write a little blockchain client, which we did. The way I have to admit, we didn't actually do the crypto library underneath it, just all of everything else. But at this point, I came into Congress a little more than 15 years ago in the special election to replace Dennis Hastert in a super Republican seat out west. And I was put on the Financial Services Committee in March of 2008, right as the whole world collapsed. And I think it was Lehman Brothers fell in October. So I was very involved in not only the emergency response to rescue the economy, but also the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform Act, the regulatory response to make sure that that this sort of calamity does not happen again. And I'm very proud of the fact that since we passed the Dodd-Frank Act, which I was actually 10 for 10 in getting my amendments into the Dodd-Frank Act, even being a junior member of Congress. But I'm very proud of the fact that we haven't had a financial crisis since then, that we actually understand a lot of about how the financial system can be operated safely and how it can, and all the dangers if you operate it unsafely. And so that sort of, before I close on that, we had at the end of the financial crisis, I think one of the best discussions of what just happened from Joseph Stiglitz, Nobel Prize winning economist. And he said, why the hell do we have financial services system at all? And so he says there are three basic functions. One of them is to allocate capital, that's to decide where you're going to actually spend money. Are you going to build bridges to nowhere or bridges that have an economic purpose and everything else? And so the allocation of capital is crucial. At the time, of course, our system had failed because the housing bubble of 2006 and 2007 was the biggest misallocation of capital in human history. The next thing it has to do is to do so efficiently. And so that you don't want to have a bunch of people sitting in the middle taking tolls and scraping out money. And there was an awful lot of that going on. In the run-up to the financial crisis, the majority of all corporate profits took place in financial services, which tells you right there it was not running efficiently. So it had failed the second part of the test. And the third one is to control risk. And so, well, enough said if you look at the number of people that suffered in the financial crisis. And so that's sort of the lens that I look through any financial proposal through, is how does that stand up against that three-part test to be effective at allocating capital, to do so efficiently, and to to control risk. And so when crypto came on the scene, first I was fascinated by the technology, and there are lots and lots of really good applications of just having a verifiable, non-falsifiable ledger is a tremendous advantage. It's actually, I think the core of that was actually, the first time I ever encountered it was, I think back in the 1980s when the signature chaining mechanism was patented, I think, having to do with having a certified timestamp on the internet. And so it's the signature chaining that's really one of the key aspects of the whole thing that makes it work. But then there is, how is this actually going to be used and deployed? And that's where it gets really complicated. And I'll say up front that I am not an anonymity absolutionist. I just don't see if there's sort of a binary choice we have to make, that either we're going to live in a world where you can't stop ransomware, you can't stop all sorts of illicit payments, or we're going to live in a world where you can. And the way I look at that is sort of similar to automobiles. When people came up with automobiles, stop and think for a moment how unacceptable it would be if you had automobiles without licenses. How essential the license has been to the successful deployment of the automobile industry. How unacceptable it would be if we had unlicensed cars driving through your neighborhood and unlicensed cars coming across your border. And so the license plate has been crucial to that. And what it provides is a form of controlled anonymity. If you're driving down the highway, you can look over and verify that person has a license plate that's valid. But you'd have no idea who they are. However, if they come into your neighborhood and run over your dog, you write down the number, you take it to a judge, to a trusted legal justice system, and you say, okay, here is the license plate, here is the proof that a crime has been committed. You don't just sit there and, I'm not a big fan at all of license plate readers everywhere that survey everything. But if you prove a crime has been committed, you need a mechanism to figure out who is in that car, and to extradite them if you have to and haul their ass into court. And that's crucial to cars becoming an acceptable product. And that, to my mind, particularly in the Democratic Party, is the key thing that the crypto industry has to come to, is to understand that controlled anonymity has to be the future if you're going to have crypto that can't be abused for ransomware, for example. It's going to be as important as the license plates were to cars. It also, interestingly, provides a clean distinction between, sometimes this is referred to as whether we're going to KYC all wallets or not. Whether you're simply going to have to, when someone offers you payment for a crypto asset, you're going to have your software look on the blockchain and make sure that all the upstream transactions have been between players with licensed wallets. And so if you see that there's a gap in the chain of custody among licensed participants, the money, you have no idea what that money has been used for and whether you're just off-ramping some potentially criminal activity. The same way, if you buy a car, one of the things you do is you look at the VIN, vehicle identification number, and make sure that nowhere in the past history of that car that you're just buying has it been stolen. And that this is one of the fundamental things that you need to have a well-regulated market. And here, in terms of this, there's sort of two different applications, I think, at least I think about very separately. If you're talking about things that where market manipulation is not a worry, these are things like stable coins, for example, which by definition have a fixed value. No one's going to engage in wash trades or this sort of stuff in stable coins. Then your main concern is privacy. You just want to make sure that if this gets used, that if it ever gets de-anonymized, that can only happen through the actions of a trusted court system. And and that's important because that means they're court systems we trust and those that we don't. And this would allow you to have all the full efficiencies that are all of the arguments that are made in favor of crypto assets can be captured without having the worry about surveillance. You simply have a very carefully set up system so that anytime you de-anonymize a wallet, that happens because a court a court that you trust has made a conclusion that this wallet has been associated with a criminal activity, and that you retain a mechanism for that. And so this is a potentially very lightweight thing and will make life much easier for crypto startups. One of the biggest burdens that crypto the whole business of KYCing your customers is not a cheap or easy thing to do, and will be necessary for certainly most of the connections of crypto with the lit financial system. And so right now, that's one of the biggest costs of either a fintech startup or a crypto startup, is getting the KYC in place. However, if the federal government said, okay, look, all you need to do is have your customer come to us, and they want to spin up a wallet, fine, get that wallet registered. Just hit the API in FinCEN or something so that wallet has been registered, gets a license plate. And then at that point, you just don't have to do KYC. You actually don't care as a crypto entity, as long as the participants, your customers, are using wallets that have license plates. Your job is done. And that is going to make the barrier to entry for crypto startups much smaller. And it really is a much better system. And what it involves is just setting up an API that you can hit. It'll take, the customer, it'll cost them 200 milliseconds to get the wallet registered and get a license plate on it. And it's actually can be better than a license plate. These algorithmic wallets that you may know about, these are sort of the equivalent of James Bond's rotating license plates. If you know the James Bond thing where the license plate flips over again and again. And so a crypto wallet that had a rotating license plate, you could look at any one of them and say, okay, I have no idea. I couldn't use that to follow you, along everything you're doing, but you could look at any one of those license plates and cryptographically verify that is actually a registered wallet. And if the owner of that wallet does something criminal, like if your screen locks up with ransomware and it says transfer this much crypto to this wallet, you say, okay, get that wallet number, take it to a judge, get it de-anonymized, and we can find out who it was that that owns that wallet. And so that sort of system is going to be as necessary to the successful development of the crypto industry as license plates were to the successful development of automobiles, which is probably the most successful product that's ever been invented by man. And you guys could follow down that road, but you're going to have to understand that you'll have to have controlled anonymity, and that anonymous self-hosting is fundamentally incompatible with that. So that's the opinion of one Democrat, or the opinion of 100% of the Democrats that actually can program. So you can look at it either way. And so there's a second thing that is what you need if you're going to use crypto for payments, like stable coins and so on. There's a second set of problems. When I came into Congress, one of the many things that broke during the financial crisis was the fact that all of the derivatives trading, options trading, all this sort of stuff was just rife with market abuses. These are things like wash trading, things like front running your customers. There was just rife in that business. And that stopped because, as part of the Dodd-Frank Act, we demanded that all players on the commodities markets, options and so on, that they needed a trader ID. And this provides the sort of controlled anonymity. So that if you're trading on the options markets today, you know that whoever's on the other side of that trade, if they're screwing you, you can go to the regulator and prove that there's some abusive thing that happened, get them de-anonymized, and get them appropriately punished, kept off of the exchange or whatever, or more severe punishment. And so when we had problems like, the London whale, which probably happened before half of you were born. Anyway, the London whale is one of the big market abuses. There was no question as to who the London whale was. When we knew something bad had happened, they said, okay, let's go, and the regulators find out who that person was. And the ID regime for, being a commodities trader is severe. I mean, they go and do biometrics to make sure you cannot operate two different identities with two different trader IDs. So you can't do wash trades or at least it's pretty damn difficult. And so that for the second class of crypto assets where the value of them are market defined rather than fixed like stable coins, then you're going to need market surveillance. You're going to have some regulator somewhere that can see the true identities of both sides of a trade. And there's simply no way to stop front running and wash trading and everything else unless some regulator somewhere, some piece of software, can see the true identities on both sides of a trade. Then you can identify wash trades. And I'm interested. I don't think there's any other way to do it. Unless you want to live and work in a market where there are estimates that somewhere between 50 and 75% of all Bitcoin trades are wash trades. Right, and I don't know how true those are, but you can't prove it. However, if there was a trader ID required for trading in Bitcoin, then those numbers would be known, and you'd know that when you invested, even in a Bitcoin ETF, that there was a real market price and not some market abuse that's driving it. And that was a huge problem that we solved and made the commodities and options markets just much more healthy, and people around the world wanted to trade in our markets when they saw that we had a valid trader ID regime. And so it really was a huge improvement and made our markets much stronger and more successful economically. Same thing will apply to crypto. At the point that if you want to sell NFTs or whatever, if the people who are buying those know for sure that there is someone watching to make sure you didn't buy an NFT, you bought an NFT at a real market price and not as a wash trade, then you're going to actually be able to have customers for those NFTs. And it's not going to be like, Melania Trump buying and selling stuff to herself, which is widely rumored to have happened when she issued some NFTs. And so this is an important part of, I think, growing up for the crypto industry. And the faster you can do that, the easier it's going to be for new participants to get into this. That a simple wallet registration thing is the one key thing you need to make that possible. Anyway, so I probably said something that's offended a third of the people in this audience easily, but I think it's really essential. I've been asking for, ever since Mark Zuckerberg came in front of our committee. At this point, I'm going to be, when Democrats win, I'm going to be the lead Democrat on the subcommittee with oversight over all banking and monetary policy. And so we're going to have to look at a lot of these things. And so I think that is going to be an essential step because crypto has the possibility of satisfying all three of Joe Stiglitz's test for the financial services system. And that one is, to which I'd add a fourth, which is reasonable expectation of privacy. Okay, and so we have to, those are the things that we have to design systems for. And, self-hosted, the anonymous self-hosting of stuff doesn't fit into that framework. And really, I think logically, unless there's some new invention out there, I think logically it never will. Anyway, so I'm happy to answer questions on anything from, high energy particle physics and to, yeah, sure.
Yeah, hi, all right. So crypto has the potential, at least to contribute, I think, to disrupting the strength of the USD currency, like international commerce. Is that geopolitical discussion present in Congress or in political circles when talking about regulating or not regulating or how crypto works?
Well, the stable coins, whatever they are, the reason that they are valuable is only because someone knows you can convert them back into real dollars. Okay, if all of a sudden that broke, let's say, I don't know, let's say that someone makes quantum work and all of a sudden that breaks all crypto, then you can say, I own this piece of crypto, but if you say, well, 10,000 other people also claim they own it because they have their own quantum computer and they've broken the code. And so if that happens, you have to understand the strength of why the US dollar is the world's currency. During the financial crisis, something happened that doesn't get a lot of attention. There's a recent article in Foreign Affairs that actually highlights this. What happened was that in that crisis, banks all around the world were getting in trouble. Central banks, not individual banks. Central banks were in real trouble because all of the troubles they had eventually fell onto their central banks. They needed a loan. And the only entity with enough financial strength to provide that loan was the Federal Reserve. So they're called currency swaps, but they functionally are loans, where they needed to pay off stuff in dollars like next week. And the only entity with enough dollars on hand was the Federal Reserve. And because of that, we saved probably a dozen central banks from failure, which would have devastated the economy. And we didn't save everyone. A lot of countries came to us and said, please, please. And we said, I'm sorry, you've not been good players in the international financial system. You're not going to be on our list of countries to save, and their life was a lot harder. That is why the US dollar, because we behave responsibly in crises, and we have an economy big enough to back the Federal Reserve. That is where the strength of the dollar comes from, not from the fact that there's a wide variety of products, from gift cards to anything else, that can be exchanged for dollars. But the fundamental strength of the dollar comes from the strength of the Federal Reserve. And so I think that's, a lot of times that gets mixed up.